All right, guys, thanks for joining me here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days, even though you're second semester seniors, so the hard work's behind you. Opening up, first question I want to ask is sort of when did you guys start the college admissions process? And yeah, take the floor.
Yeah, I guess if I could just kick things off, it seems like Prep does a good job of preparing us pretty early for the process, so building a list quite early and all that kind of stuff. I guess I would say that things really ramped up the summer before senior year. Definitely. That's when I started writing my essays. That's when I started to really finalize kind of who I wanted to be to the admissions committees, who I wanted to present myself as. So that's kind of when it really started to ramp up.
Gotcha. Yeah. Something I'll add on for me when it started was it's all about building that list. I think in the middle of my junior year, I started jotting down, in my notes app on my phone, schools that I'd heard of, schools that I knew, schools I knew I wanted to tour. I kind of sat down with my parents, talked about like location first of where I wanted to be in the country or out of the country or where I didn't want to be. So building that list before you even knew general information was important. And then you kind of, in the junior year, you kind of just basically create, I recommend this, just making a Google Drive. That's the first thing I did. I made a Google Drive that had the names of each of the schools I was interested in. And if for some reason you don't like one, you just delete it and you just move on from that. So that was kind of the start.
For me, it kind of ramped up in July. I set a definite list of when I want everything to be done. So I set a date on when I want my essay to be done, when I want all my applications in, and it kind of just kept me on task. And it was like a due date, and it really helped organize me and structure the approach to it.
Yeah, I think it's never too early to start. You want to have a good plan and you want to be organized for what you're doing. So whatever system works best for you. For me, I took a different approach. I was kind of doing a lot of my stuff on like a secondary website called Custom College Plan. So that's a really good way to keep your essays in check and also make sure that you're hitting your deadlines when they come up. So.
I started my college application, like my real college admissions process, sort of at the beginning of the summer, going into my senior year. Before I had a pretty vague list with different types of schools that I knew I perhaps wanted to be at and perhaps could be happy at, but then it sort of funneled down. And by the time I started summer was when I started really doing essays and doing college tours. And it was essentially there that my real process started.
I feel like people do push off essays. Like everyone's like, oh, I've got the whole summer. I want to write them all throughout the summer. Comes you're in your first week of school and you're like, oh, still have 3 more essays to write for this school, and you kind of wait. So yeah, I get it. You're right now thinking by the time they're watching this video, they're probably thinking, oh, I got the summer. I'll just crank it out in the summer. But it's summer. Like people, go have fun and do stuff, and they might forget. But I just really think. I regret this because I pushed some essays off. I did some during the summer, but I pushed a lot off to the fall. Take the time, plan them out, really just start writing. That's the thing is like you can write a terrible first draft of these essays, and honestly, you get a lot out of it. And whoever's looking it over, family, friend, parents, guidance counselor, teacher, they're not going to be like, this is a terrible essay. They're going to be like, all right, this is good, this is not. And they're going to be honest because they want you to get into that school. So, don't push it off to the last minute. Find resources, go out to your teachers, go to your guidance counselors, ask for help. I've even had classmates look over essays to help. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree to what Nick was saying is, stuff happens. Like you're going to probably eventually push some stuff back into the fall. Like saying, I'm going to get everything done over the summer is an aggressive approach and sometimes unrealistic. But as long as you have, that initial idea and that first draft done, I think you're in a really good place going into the school year. As long as you know what you have to do and you have that idea and you kind of can visualize where you see it going. So I think that's important.
I also just want to kind of expand what quote-unquote starting looks like. Sometimes when we think of the college admissions process, we think of it as really like official and how you have to really like sit down and really think about all the things, and every step that you take into it has to be done with so much intention. But honestly, the vast majority of my college essays started off in the notes app of my phone, right? So, starting means a different thing for a lot of different people. So, if starting just means for you kind of thinking of things on the ride into school or something along those lines, then that's great. If you're one of the type of people that like wants to write a draft junior year and have that Google Doc all set, then that's great as well. But, this takes a lot of different forms, in other words.
Yeah, I recommend reading, actually, even if you're not motivated to do the writing really early, go read the questions, because you'll actually find some colleges, they make some weird essay topics or questions, and you're just like, oh man, I have no idea like what my favorite candy bar is and why. Like, I've never even thought about that. And so like kind of gets you thinking. I remember one of my applications had a long list of like 1-word answers, and you're like, oh, that's easy, I just write 1 word. But then you're like actually writing down it and you're like, I don't know if this is right. And you literally spend 30 minutes thinking of 1 word for an answer. So I recommend going in, looking at the portal or whatever that you find the questions in for the colleges, and read the questions, find previous year questions, talk to people who, have applied to the school, and what kind of, if you don't know what the questions are yet, kind of get a general idea of what you should start thinking about. And like Brea said here, you put in your notes, you put in a voice memo, something like that. So that's kind of recommendation.
And some of you mentioned when you guys thought of the colleges you were applying to, and like ish timing of when you were looking at schools. Speaking of prep resources, what was your relationship with the guidance counselors that you had in terms of like, and I know prep's unique in that you get a guidance counselor all 4 years, but when did your sort of like college search start really using the counselor a lot?
I think it was the beginning of my junior year. I went down to Mr. Hutchinson, and we kind of made that first list of potential colleges. And, that was the first time, but it kind of became more repeated as, the year went on and the list got shorter and, added schools, stuff like that. But yeah, I'd say it started like mid-junior year, and those first couple months of senior year, it was like once a week, weekly check-ins, see where I was in the process.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think, you start as broad as possible. So I kind of went down to Mr. Hanahan's room and I was like, okay, so let's talk about college. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really know anything about it yet. So we had a ton of conversations, a lot of changing the list, a lot of like, actually, I don't really want to go to the school anymore. So it's good to start as early as possible. And I know I keep saying that, but I feel like the earlier you start, the more you start, gaining more knowledge about how like the system works. You start understanding, okay, this is what we should do, this is what we shouldn't do. And I think, guidance counselors are perfect, resources for that. So.
Yeah, and the first couple of meetings, similar in the middle, kind of beginning of junior year, you're not really talking about the names of the schools yet. You're kind of talking about who you are, what kind of things you're interested in studying, where do you want to go. Like I said earlier, you kind of get build in a filter so that when you quick search, you can have all these different lists that fit the criteria of what you want. But it's also just like being honest to yourself, like knowing what kind of school will like be able to take you in and you can be the best self that you can be. Because there are some schools that, might be a top name and you think, oh, well, I have a high GPA, I have high this, I should be applying to this school. But to be honest, you may not genuinely feel like that's the place. So this is why those conversations with your guidance counselor early on are helpful, because it gets you in the right mindset of like, I want to go to a school for who I am. So that's kind of important. So I would say the earlier you start having these conversations, the better, because then you get to have as many as possible. It's not like we're getting charged for each time we have a meeting. So obviously it's part of the prep experience. So you just got to be good at scheduling. Email. I can't believe I'm saying this, but like kids just don't email. Like there are people who just don't use email at all. So, email your guidance counselor, let them know you want to talk, and, take the first step, because the guidance counselors have so many kids. They can't just chase us all around all the time. So you got to take the first step and be bold. Yeah.
As many of you know, and the juniors probably think about this often, testing is a big part although in light of the COVID pandemic, testing became sort of an optional thing. Can you guys speak a little bit about how you navigated the test optional required and how that affected your applications?
Yeah, definitely. So around the end of my junior year, I was looking into the list of schools that I had, and I realized that the vast majority of them did not require tests. So I thought I was off the hook. Unfortunately, Georgetown did require it. So I had to study up a lot, and I had to work really hard to get a certain score. If I could just kind of speak towards that too, the process for getting the score that you need is often much more difficult than people put it out to be. These tests aren't necessarily designed to measure, your static intelligence. In other words, you can increase your score by a lot. My score increased by 420 points personally, just from like the first test to the third, right? So it's just a matter of getting to know the tests and kind of all the little strategies and tips there. But you can definitely improve a lot from it, and it's not kind of a static thing. So yeah,
It's a game.
it's a game. Yeah,
I think that along the testing lines, it's not really a matter about what schools require, what schools don't. I think it's more a reflective thing, and sort of if you can dedicate yourself to spending, 2 or 3 nights a week for 3 months to better your score. If you really think you can do that, if you really think you can be in the best version of yourself for a score or for a school, then I think you should dedicate yourself to trying to get that. If not, then it doesn't matter if a school's test optional or not. You need to know yourself if you're going to be test optional, if you yourself are going to be test optional or not. So
Yeah, I think that it's really how do you want your person to be reflected on the paper, because they don't really, college admissions officers aren't going to see you, I guess. So you want to see, am I putting my best foot forward? Am I showing what I want them to see? And I think that's really a choice that you have to make. Some colleges are test optional, some are not. But I think that that's something that you need to decide for yourself. Personally, I did go test optional. I didn't really think it was a great representation of me. And that's okay. So if you're in that boat, that is completely okay. But if you feel like, the test is a good way for you to show who you are, then I think you should do your best to get the highest score you can.
I can only say this about testing. I took every SAT possible between in last year. So I took all 4 available, and my scores weren't getting to where I needed them to be, and I didn't submit test scores. I got into my school, which was test optional, but I just think the tests can only help you. They're not going to hurt your application. They're not going to draw you backwards if you didn't submit a test. If you have a very high test score, obviously send that in. It will only boost you. It can't really hurt you. Like I said before, these tests are like a game. Some people are just gifted in that this is something they're very good at. You can study a ton and get better. For some people, you study a lot and you go up a lot. Study a lot, you can only go up by 30, 40 points, and at the end you're just not that good of a test taker, and that's just how it is. But don't submit your test, you still can get into school. So don't feel like if you don't submit your test, don't even apply to the school. It's just, it's just kind of how it works.
I also just wanted to add a footnote. A lot of colleges have what's called a common data set. So if you look up the college's name and then say common data set PDF, what that document will give you is the kind of percentiles from the average admitted student class, right? So you'll see the average SAT score, and you'll see the lower 25th and then the higher 25th. So personally, I was a little bit worried because I was just below the 75th for Georgetown. So I was like, I got to take it one more time and stuff like that. Francine was like, do not worry. Your application is much more, dynamic than just what your test score represents, which is basically what we've all been saying, right? So the common data set is a really good resource to use. But again, it's not the end all be all of your entire application.
And in terms of timeline, I know we've talked about that a little bit today. When did you guys start taking to when did you stop taking in the fall? If you could just give me
So I think I took my first ACT in April of my junior year, and I took the last one in July of the summer. I took 2 in between, and my score went up every single time. I managed to super score. But that 4-month period, I think you just need to dedicate 2 or 3 months to 8 tests. And I don't think you need to take one more than 3 times, because at that point you sort of plateau.
I took 3 real SATs. I probably took about 12, 13 practice ones spread out through my entire junior year. I mean, obviously not all in one sitting, but I just thought that, if I just keep doing this, it will just go up, it will get better. You just keep taking it, it will get better. It does just plateau. Once you hit this certain score, that's just how it is. Obviously, if you study, I'm not going to say that you can't study and get better. You can. Some people obviously studied very hard and they went up a lot. Some people, this is why colleges are making test optional, because they believe that testing isn't what defines a student. They wouldn't be doing this if they didn't believe that. So, you can take only 1 SAT or take 4, just depends on the person.
Or you could be like me and I didn't take a test. I went, completely test optional. I knew where I wanted to apply, and, we're definitely in a weird time in the college admissions, timeline, where it's just after pandemic, and a lot of stuff is coming out about the SAT and how it, you can't let that define you, and you can't let that number define you. And I know myself, and I know I'm not necessarily the greatest test taker, so I did opt out of the SAT and the standardized testing. So
I probably should have joined you on that one.
Well, as we're getting towards the end of the session, what is one piece of advice that you received that you guys want to pass on to the next class of guys who are about to go into this process?
It's such a cliche. I have to say it. Please be yourself. That is so very, very important. It is so easy to use fancy words in your applications. It's easy to, inflate certain things about your extracurriculars and whatnot, but in the end, it's going to end up being worse off for you, because you're going to end up at a school that doesn't necessarily fit who you are, but rather that kind of fake version that you've constructed in order to impress other people. So, just be yourself. That's really my point of advice.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that, I think colleges want to see that original self. They want to see that you're passionate about something. So whatever you're passionate about, you should just really go after. There's no need to, what do they I think they want to see this. They want to see me, do certain clubs or join certain organizations. But the truth is, they just really want to see what makes you different, what makes you unique, why you're special, and why you're such a good fit. So if I could just give any advice, it would probably just be to, it's not a very fun process. I'll just come out and say that. But it's something that you have to do. So just work hard through it and be yourself. As Lewis said, that's really the best advice anyone could give.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that advice. You sort of want to resonate with what you're talking about. Colleges do admit you based on what you tell them, what you show them. And if at the end of the day you get admitted into a school by being by pumping up everything and by talking about somebody that isn't actually who you are, you will end up at a place that you're not happy at and that you don't feel perfect at, because that's the student they admitted, not yourself. So definitely you want to be writing along lines that resonate with you and lines that, feel like you're representing an honest portion about yourself. So I definitely stick with that advice, and that's probably the most important part of college applications.
For the college process, my advice is, kind of do your own thing and keep it genuine to yourself, like you guys have said. But a lot of people try to tell you, it's such a stressful time, where you hear it 1,000 times, 1,000. Where are you going to school? What are you doing next year? And just don't let that stress you out. You're going to find your school however you find your school, and it's all going to be okay. So.
Yeah. All right, I guess I'll give the last advice here. While you're looking at schools or looking for schools, you're going to definitely search up what are the top 100 schools in the country, what are the best schools to go to. Now, if you have a high GPA or not, you're going to feel like, oh, if I have a high GPA, here's my top 3 schools in the country. These are the 3 I'm applying to, no question. Obviously, my GPA is like this. If you feel like your GPA is lower, you're like, okay, here are these kind of schools I can get into. No, I don't believe that. I believe that you have to really look into a school's purpose. There are schools that have different programs that fit you and what you are like into and stuff. So you're better off, if your Common App has a lot of stuff in art and music and in graphic art and all these different things, and you apply to a school that's, a top 10 school in the country, but its primary is science and stuff, that's not where you belong. That's not where you fit. So I would say really look into schools that have where you and people like you belong. Because you don't want to go to a school where everyone's saying this here, but you don't want to go to a school where you don't fit in and you don't belong, and you're not going to want to transfer out of your freshman year because you're either struggling, you can't find yourself in a place that you belong, and you went to a school that's way too difficult for the level that you're at, or you went to a school that's just too easy for the level that you're at. So there's a right place for everyone. Be excited. You're gonna face rejection during the application process. It's gonna happen. But the day that you do get into your school will probably be happiest day of your life. So yeah.
Could I add one last thing too? This is kind of an unconventional approach to the whole system, but my sisters recommended that I keep all of my colleges a secret on my list throughout the entire process until I had made my final decision. And this was kind of a way to avoid the culture around, oh, I'm so nervous. What's your SAT score, etc. Right? That was a really, really helpful way for me to kind of navigate the system and not be necessarily as anxious about the results because I hadn't shared it with everyone in the world. So, this isn't necessarily, everyone should keep that a secret. If you'd like to be more open about the process, then that's great. But also for those people that are a little bit more kind of nervous about it and want to keep it a secret, then that's definitely great too. I found that kind of approach very fulfilling.
Thank you guys so much for helping the rising seniors with this process, and I thank you guys for your time today. You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
So,
good luck, boys.
Thanks. Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.